My name is Hanna Nikkanen. I'm the visiting professor for journalism at the University of Tampere for 2016-2017. I'm very interested in, of course, in the rise of long-form journalism, because that's also what I've been working on. But we are gaining this new understanding that audiences, in fact, do want to get in-depth journalism, and that's perhaps what is the future of our field. The part that we cannot replace by robots is the part that will always need a human journalist, a human touch, which means complex issues, local issues, preferably complex and local issues. And this is something that I think kind of the next generation of journalists is going to spend a lot of time studying and working on. Well, more and more often, future journalists are going to have to, for one, create their own jobs. Which I don't want to say that everyone is going to need to be an entrepreneur, because I think that's a kind of a troubling and annoying way of speaking that we hear a lot in journalism education. Not everyone is going to be an entrepreneur, but change will be faster. Change in jobs, in job descriptions will be faster, and people will more often work alone or in small groups, and not as much as part of big newsrooms where they will remain for the kind of the entirety of their careers. So that they are going to prepare for. And another thing that I think is very important is just this idea of managing complexity, managing an increasing amount of knowledge, increasingly complex information streams, being like very fast and very innovative in the use of technology. And for one, climate change, that has been a problem for journalists for 20 years now. It's like we know that this is happening. This is going to define this century. It is the biggest news story, except that it's not news story. It sort of defies the logic of journalism, where we are looking for a very specific kind of event that we can cover. And when you have a slow, gradual change that mostly takes place in the future but needs action now, our tools as journalists, especially in traditional news journalism, they just don't fit. Like, this is a whole kind of a different kind of a story. And because of that, we've been pretty much neglecting it. Or we've been putting it into a couple of neat boxes, like we can make news about climate negotiations, but that's not the entire picture. That's not really what the audience wants and needs. This is the worst kind of story for journalism, and yet somehow we are going to have to cover it. So this means that we're going to have to find new ways of kind of building narrative. We're going to have to be critical of the ideas that we have about using narrative so far, when we are faced with a situation where it simply does not work, or where narrative might lead us in the wrong direction. So this is one thing that I'm really interested in looking at. It's not only climate change. A lot of current, like the most important issues that we have, a lot of work that we should be doing about global economy is the exact same thing. We've also been living in a time where lots of new journalism startups keep popping up, and very few of them actually survive in the market. And now kind of we've had enough time to sort of see what works where, what might work where, and I'm not as opposed to talking to students about entrepreneurship as I used to be, because now we at least know something about what might work. But what I want to look at is the European market, what kinds of journalism, like new small journalist-owned journalism companies, have been successful in Europe, especially in markets that are comparable to Finland. So small language groups, preferably a fairly highly educated population, because I want to be able to make some sort of comparisons, see who failed, who is being successful, and what could we recommend to, for example, to the next generation of journalists. But even more importantly, then, when we look at all this and when we spend a lot of time talking about that, what does all of this do to the content? Because obviously funding influences content. We haven't really had that discussion in journalism yet. We do, we wonder about the future of the field and the future, the possible business logics that we might find, but we haven't really moved on to thinking about, what are we going to lose? What is going to disappear, for example, if certain kinds of traditional, old-fashioned publishing houses or publishing methods fail? What does that do to news production, for example, which is not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to start up a newsroom with, kind of small investors or, out of your own pocket or with crowdfunding, all of these, different kinds of funding that journalism startups right now usually have to work with. That's the part of the journalism business discussion that we're having that is sort of neglected still.